The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 p.m. when David's car started making that sound again, that grinding noise that meant another expensive repair he couldn't afford. He gripped the steering wheel tighter and kept driving. What choice did he have? It had been another long day, another job interview where they smiled politely and said they'd call back. They never did. David was 38 years old, and somehow his life had become a collection of unpaid bills and broken promises. His ex-wife had left 3 years ago, taking nothing but her clothes and leaving behind 2 confused kids who still asked when Mommy was coming home. Now it was just him, his daughter Lily, who was 7, and his son Ben, who was 10. 3 people trying to survive on part-time work and hope. The eviction notice was still sitting in his glove compartment. He hadn't told the kids yet. How do you tell your children that you might lose your home? David rubbed his eyes as he drove across the old bridge that stretched over the river. This route home was longer, but it saved him $2 in tolls. $2 mattered when you were counting pennies for school lunches. That's when his headlights caught something that made his heart stop. A figure stood on the outside of the bridge railing. A young woman with long, dark hair whipping in the wind. She was facing away from the road toward the black water below. Her hands gripped the metal behind her, knuckles white in the glare of his headlights. David's foot hit the brake before his mind fully processed what he was seeing. The car jerked to a stop. For a split second, he thought about driving on. He had his own problems, his own kids waiting at home with a babysitter he could barely afford. But then he thought about Lily and Ben, and how he'd want someone to stop if they ever needed help. He turned on his hazard lights and got out of the car. The wind hit him immediately, cold and sharp. The bridge was empty at this hour. Just him, his dying car, and this girl who looked barely old enough to be out of high school. "Hey!" David called out, his voice almost lost in the wind. He kept his distance, remembering something he'd read once about not startling people in crisis. "Please don't do that." The girl's head turned slightly. He could see her face now in the streetlight. Tears streaked her cheeks. She looked so young. Maybe 19 or 20. Someone's daughter. "You should just go," she said. Her voice was small, tired. "This has nothing to do with you." David's hands were shaking, but he tried to keep his voice steady. "You're right. I don't know you. I don't know what brought you here. But I do know that whatever you're feeling right now, it won't last forever. Nothing does. You don't understand," she said. "Nobody understands." "Maybe not," David admitted, taking one careful step closer. "But I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning. Like there's no way out." He surprised himself by talking about his wife leaving, about working 3 different part-time jobs and still not making enough, about his daughter asking why they couldn't go on the field trip because he couldn't afford the $15 fee, about lying awake at 3 in the morning wondering if his kids would be better off without him dragging them down. "Last week," David said, "my son asked me if we were poor. He's 10 years old. And you know what killed me? I didn't know how to answer him. Because yeah, we are. And I'm supposed to be the dad who fixes things, who makes everything okay. But I can't even keep a roof over their heads." The girl was listening now. Her grip on the railing had loosened slightly. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me," David continued. "I'm telling you because I get it. I get feeling like you've failed. Like you're not enough. Like maybe everyone would be better off if you just disappeared." "Then why are you still here?" she asked, her voice breaking. David thought about that. "Honestly, because my son still hugs me goodnight. Because my daughter draws me pictures at school. Because yesterday, when I made mac and cheese for dinner again, they didn't complain. They just ate it and told me it was good. They still need me even though I'm a mess. And somewhere someone still needs you too." The girl started crying harder. "My parents don't even talk to me anymore. I lost my scholarship. I can't do anything right. What's your name?" David asked gently. There was a long pause. "Isabella." "Isabella, I'm David. And I know we just met, but I'm asking you to climb back over here. Not because everything will magically be okay tomorrow. It won't be. But because maybe next week will be better. Or next month. Or next year. You can't know if you're not here to see it." For the next hour they talked. David told her about his kids' obsession with building blanket forts. About the stray cat that kept showing up on their doorstep that they'd secretly been feeding. About how coffee somehow tasted better at 5 in the morning, when you're the only one awake. Isabella talked too. About pressure that felt like drowning. About trying so hard to be perfect that she forgot how to just be herself. about feeling invisible even when people were looking right at her. Slowly, carefully, Isabella climbed back over the railing. The moment her feet touched the safe side of the bridge, her legs gave out. David caught her, and they both ended up sitting on the cold concrete. She sobbed against his shoulder while he just held on, the way he held his own kids when they had nightmares. Police cars arrived about 10 minutes later. Someone had seen them and called. Then came the ambulance, its lights painting everything red and blue. The paramedics were kind but efficient, checking Isabella over, asking questions in calm voices. Before they took her away, Isabella grabbed David's hand. "Thank you for stopping. Thank you for seeing me." David pulled out an old receipt from his pocket and borrowed a pen from one of the officers. He scribbled his phone number on it. If you ever need someone to talk to, even if it's just about blanket forts or stray cats or terrible coffee. Isabella took the receipt like it was something precious. She nodded, unable to speak, and then the ambulance doors closed. David stood on the empty bridge as they drove away, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. One of the police officers patted his shoulder. "You did good tonight, man. Real good." As David drove home, the sun was starting to rise, painting the sky pink and orange. His car still made that terrible grinding sound. The eviction notice was still in his glove compartment. Nothing about his life had changed, but somehow everything felt different. He thought about Isabella, hoping she'd be okay. Hoping she'd use that phone number. Hoping that tomorrow, when she woke up, she'd be glad she climbed back over that railing. When David finally got home, his kids were still asleep. He looked in on them, watching them breathe in the early morning light. Lily was hugging her stuffed rabbit. Ben had kicked off his blankets again. David pulled Ben's blankets back up and kissed both their foreheads. They'd probably eat cereal for breakfast because that's all he could afford right now. They'd probably wear clothes that were a little too small because new ones weren't in the budget. But they were here, and they were his, and somehow that was enough. He didn't know it yet, but that night on the bridge would change everything. Not just for him and not just for Isabella. Sometimes saving someone else's life is the first step towards saving your own. Sometimes all it takes is being in the right place at the right time and choosing not to drive past someone who needs help, even when you feel like you barely have anything left to give, especially then. 3 days passed and David tried not to think about the girl from the bridge. He had his own life to worry about. Bills to pay, kids to feed, a car that was one breakdown away from completely dying. But he couldn't stop wondering if Isabella was okay. If she'd thrown away that receipt with his number on it. If she regretted climbing back over that railing. It was Saturday afternoon and David was at the community food bank with Lily and Ben. It wasn't his favorite thing, accepting charity. But pride didn't fill empty stomachs and the kids needed to eat. Ben was being helpful, carrying a box of pasta. Lily kept trying to sneak extra cookies into their bag when she thought nobody was looking. That's when David's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Usually unknown numbers meant bill collectors or scam calls, but something made him pick up. Hello? David? The voice was hesitant, soft. It's Isabella. From the bridge. David's heart jumped. He stepped away from the kids, moving toward a quieter corner. Isabella, hey, I've been thinking about you. Are you okay? I'm at a hospital. A psychiatric facility, actually. They're keeping me here for evaluation. She paused. I wanted to hear your voice. To make sure that night was real. That you were real. They talked for 20 minutes. David learned that Isabella was 20 years old. That she'd been on a full scholarship to a prestigious university studying to be a doctor. That she'd lost everything when depression hit her so hard she couldn't get out of bed for weeks. Failed classes. Lost scholarship. Disappointed parents who didn't understand mental illness. They worked so hard to give me opportunities, Isabella said, her voice cracking. 3 jobs between the two of them, just to make sure I had everything. And I threw it all away. You didn't throw anything away, David said firmly. You got sick. That's not the same thing. My parents don't see it that way. David looked over at his own kids. Ben was now helping an elderly woman reach something on a high shelf. Lily was chattering away to another child. Parents aren't perfect, Isabella. We mess up, we say the wrong things. But that doesn't mean you deserved what happened to you. Over the next 2 weeks, David visited Isabella at the facility 3 times. It wasn't easy finding the time between work and taking care of the kids, but he went anyway. Isabella had no other visitors. Her parents hadn't come once. They'd sit in the common room drinking terrible coffee from paper cups and talk. David told her about his failed marriage, about the crushing weight of trying to be both mom and dad. Isabella told him about the pressure she'd felt since childhood to be perfect, to make her immigrant parents' sacrifices worth it. "I speak 3 languages," Isabella said one day. "I graduated high school at 16. I got a perfect score on my entrance exams, and none of it mattered the moment I couldn't hold it together anymore." David shook his head. "It does matter. You're brilliant, Isabella, and one day when you're ready, you'll do something amazing with that brain of yours." On Isabella's release day, David came to pick her up. She walked out with a small backpack containing everything she owned and nowhere to go. Her parents had made it clear she wasn't welcome home. Not until she got her act together and stopped embarrassing the family. David made a decision that surprised even himself. "Look, this is going to sound crazy, but I have a guest room. Well, it's technically a laundry room with a fold-out couch, but it's warm and safe and you're welcome to stay until you figure things out." Isabella stared at him. "David, I can't. You already have 2 kids to take care of. And one more person won't break us. We're already broken." He smiled. "Besides, Lily's been asking when you're coming over. Apparently, you promised to teach her how to say cookie in Spanish." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Galera, see? I already forgot. We need you around." The first week was awkward. Isabella tried to take up as little space as possible, like she was afraid of being a burden. She'd wake up early, fold up the couch, and disappear into her room whenever she wasn't needed. But slowly, she became part of their strange little family. She helped Ben with his homework, explaining math concepts in ways that actually made sense. She taught Lily Spanish phrases, turning it into a game. She even figured out how to fix their broken toaster with nothing but a YouTube video and a butter knife. David came home from work one evening to find Isabella making dinner. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and sauce from a jar. But the table was set and his kids were actually sitting at it without being asked. "You didn't have to do this," David said. Isabella shrugged. "I wanted to. You've done so much for me. It's the least I can do." They fell into a routine. David worked during the day. Isabella found a part-time job at a bookstore, something easy and low stress while she attended therapy twice a week. In the evenings, they'd all have dinner together, sharing stories about their day. But David noticed things that worried him. Isabella had nightmares that woke up the whole apartment. She barely ate, pushing food around her plate, and twice, he'd found her standing by the window at 3 a.m. with that same distant look she'd had on the bridge. One night, after the kids were asleep, David found Isabella in the kitchen, staring at a bottle of sleeping pills her doctor had prescribed. "Isabella?" She jumped, nearly dropping the bottle. "I wasn't going to. I was just thinking." David sat down at the kitchen table. "You want to talk about it?" "Some days are harder than others," Isabella admitted, sitting across from him. "Today I saw a girl at the bookstore wearing a university sweatshirt. She was buying textbooks. And I just kept thinking that should be me. That was supposed to be my life." "It still can be," David said. "How?" "I'm a college dropout living in someone's laundry room. My parents won't even talk to me." "I have nothing, David. I am nothing." "Stop," David said, more firmly than he intended. "You're not nothing. You're the person who taught my daughter that it's okay to be scared of the dark. You're the person who helped my son understand fractions when I couldn't. You're the person who fixed our toaster and makes actual vegetables appear at dinner. You matter, Isabella. To us, you matter." Isabella wiped her eyes. "I'm so tired of feeling like this, I know. But you're still here. You're still fighting. That takes more strength than being perfect ever did." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator. Then Isabella said something that changed everything. "David, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you from the beginning." She took a deep breath. "My last name is Castellano. My father owns Castellano Construction. You've probably seen the signs around the city." David froze. Castellano Construction. They'd built half the commercial buildings downtown. They were one of the biggest companies in the region. "You're from that family?" Isabella nodded. "I didn't tell you because for the first time in my life someone saw me as just Isabella. Not as the Castellano daughter. Not as an investment that failed to pay off. Just me." David processed this. The girl he'd saved, the girl sleeping on a fold-out couch in his laundry room, came from wealth he couldn't even imagine. Why didn't they help you? David asked. With money like that, they could have gotten you the best treatment. They did, Isabella said quietly. 5 different psychiatrists, 3 rehabilitation centers, all very expensive, all very private. But they weren't trying to help me get better. They were trying to make the problem go away, make me go away. David reached across the table and took her hand. Well, you're not going anywhere. This is your home now for as long as you need it. Isabella squeezed his hand. Thank you. What neither of them knew was that Isabella's past was about to catch up with them in ways they never expected. 2 months passed, and life actually started to feel normal. David finally got hired full-time as a warehouse supervisor. It wasn't his dream job, but it paid enough to stop the eviction and put real food on the table. For the first time in years, he could breathe without that constant knot of panic in his chest. Isabella was thriving too. Her nightmares were less frequent. She'd gained weight, and there was color in her cheeks that hadn't been there before. She was even talking about going back to school, maybe studying psychology instead of medicine. She wanted to help people like herself. Ben and Lily had completely adopted her as part of the family. They didn't call her Isabella anymore. It was always Izzy. Izzy helped them with homework. Izzy read bedtime stories. Izzy made the best pancakes on Saturday mornings. David's apartment, which had felt cold and empty for so long, finally felt like a home. Then everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon. David was at work when his phone buzzed. A text from Isabella with a photo attached. A black Mercedes was parked outside their apartment building. The message read, "My brother found me." David's stomach dropped. He asked his supervisor for an early break and called Isabella immediately. "Are you okay? Did you talk to him?" "Not yet. He's just sitting in his car. David, I don't know what to do." Isabella's voice was shaking. "I'm coming home. Don't go outside alone. Wait for me." David broke every speed limit getting back to the apartment. When he pulled up, the Mercedes was still there. As he got out of his car, the driver's door opened and a man in an expensive suit stepped out. He looked like an older male version of Isabella. Same dark hair, same eyes. But where Isabella's eyes held warmth, this man's were cold, calculating. "You must be David," the man said, not offering his hand. "I'm Raphael, Isabella's brother. What do you want?" David asked, positioning himself between Raphael and the apartment building. "I want my sister to come home, to get proper help, to stop living like this." Raphael gestured dismissively at the modest apartment complex. Before David could respond, Isabella came outside. She looked small, scared. Nothing like the confident young woman she'd been becoming. "Izzy, you don't have to talk to him," David said. "It's okay." Isabella walked up to her brother, her arms crossed defensively. "What do you want, Raphael?" "What do I want?" Raphael's voice was sharp. "I want to know why you're living in poverty when you have a family, when you have resources. This is embarrassing, Isabella, for all of us." "Embarrassing?" Isabella's voice rose. "I was dying, Raphael. Actually dying. And all you cared about was how it looked to your business partners." Raphael's jaw tightened. "We tried to help you. Multiple times. You refused treatment. You tried to hide me." Isabella shot back. "Those weren't treatment centers. They were places where rich people send their problems to be out of sight. Nobody cared about making me better. They cared about making me quiet. That's not fair, isn't it?" Isabella's hands were shaking now. "When was the last time Mom called me? When was the last time Dad asked how I was doing? I had 3 suicide attempts, Raphael, 3. And you know what you did? You paid doctors to keep it quiet. You made me sign non-disclosure agreements like I was a PR problem, not your sister." David watched Raphael's face. There was a flicker of something, maybe guilt, maybe shame, but it disappeared quickly. "You need professional help," Raphael said. "Not whatever this is. No offense," he glanced at David, "but you're a warehouse worker. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Isabella has serious mental health issues. She needs specialists, medication management, proper supervision." "She needs family," David said quietly. "She needs people who see her as a person, not a problem to fix." Raphael ignored him, focusing on Isabella. "Come home, please. We can find better doctors. Better treatment. You can have your own place, your privacy, anything you want. Except acceptance," Isabella said. "Except for you to love me when I'm broken, not just when I'm perfect." Raphael's expression hardened. "Fine, stay here. Keep playing house with your rescue family. But when this falls apart, and it will, don't expect us to be there to pick up the pieces again." He got back in his Mercedes and drove away, leaving Isabella standing there, tears streaming down her face. David put his arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" "No," Isabella whispered, "but I will be." That night, after the kids were asleep, Isabella and David sat on the tiny balcony of his apartment. The city lights twinkled below them. Isabella was quiet, holding a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. "I need to tell you the whole truth," Isabella finally said. "About my family. About everything." She told David about growing up as the youngest Castellano child, how her 3 older siblings had all gone into the family business, successful and stable. How she'd been the different one, the sensitive one, the one who felt everything too deeply. "The pressure started when I was little," Isabella said. "My parents came to this country with nothing. They built that company from the ground up, and they expected all of us to be grateful, to be perfect, to make their sacrifices worth it." She told him about the panic attacks that started at 15, how she'd hide in bathroom stalls at school, gasping for air, convinced she was dying, how her parents dismissed it as stress, as drama, as her being weak. "When I got the scholarship to university, they were so proud. Finally, I was doing something right. But then the depression hit and I couldn't get out of bed. Couldn't go to class. Couldn't function." Isabella's voice broke. "I tried to tell them. I tried to explain that something was wrong with me. But they just kept saying I needed to try harder, work harder, be stronger." The first suicide attempt happened during finals week of her freshman year. She took pills, lots of them. Her roommate found her and called 911. "My father came to the hospital," Isabella continued. "And you know what he said?" He asked if anyone had seen. If anyone knew. "He was more worried about the family reputation than the fact that I almost died." The second attempt was a year later, and then the third, on the bridge where David found her. "After the first 2 times, they didn't even seem surprised anymore," Isabella said. "Just disappointed. Like I was choosing to be this way. Choosing to be broken." David felt anger rising in his chest. "That's not how mental illness works, and I know that now. My therapist has been helping me understand that. But for so long I believed them. I believed I was weak. That if I just tried harder I could be normal." "You are normal," David said. "You're a human being with an illness. That's all. It doesn't make you weak or broken or less than anyone else." Isabella wiped her eyes. "Living here with you and the kids, it's the first time I've felt like myself. Not the Castellano daughter. Not the failed scholarship student. Not the family embarrassment. Just Isabella. You'll always be just Isabella here," David promised. Isabella smiled, but it was sad. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve your kindness." "Stop," David said firmly. "You saved my life too, you know. Before you came, I was drowning, working myself to death, barely holding on, wondering if my kids would be better off without me. But you showed up and you helped. You made us feel like a family again. You gave me hope that broken things can be fixed. So yeah, you deserve every bit of kindness I can give you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city below. "David," Isabella said quietly, "there's something else. Something I've been working on for the last few weeks. Something I need to tell you about." "What is it?" Isabella took a deep breath. "When I turned 21 4 months ago, I got access to my trust fund. Money my grandfather left me. It's a lot, David, more than $2 million. David's head spun. "What? I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd see me differently. But I've been meeting with lawyers and accountants. I want to do something with it. Something that matters." She pulled out her phone and showed him documents, plans, proposals. "I want to start a foundation," Isabella said, her eyes bright with purpose for the first time. "A real crisis intervention program. Not just a hotline that puts you on hold. Real people, real help, real support for people like me." David stared at the plans, overwhelmed. "And I want you to help me run it," Isabella continued. "Not as an employee, as a partner. You understand what it's like to be at the edge. You know how to reach people." "Isabella, I'm not qualified for something like that. You saved my life with a gas station receipt and a kind word," Isabella said. "That's the only qualification that matters." David looked at this young woman who'd come into his life on the worst night of both their lives, who'd become family, who was now offering him a chance to turn pain into purpose. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it. Together." Isabella smiled, really smiled, and for the first time since the bridge, David saw hope in her eyes that matched his own. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. David couldn't believe this was his life now. He'd gone from struggling to pay rent to sitting in meetings with lawyers, accountants, and nonprofit consultants. Isabella had been right. They were learning everything together. During the day, David still worked at the warehouse. They needed the steady income while getting the foundation off the ground. But every evening and weekend, he and Isabella worked on their dream. They named it the Second Chance Foundation. Isabella handled the business side, the numbers, the legal paperwork. David focused on the actual program, designing how they'd help people in crisis. He took online courses in suicide prevention, crisis intervention, and mental health first aid. He studied every night after the kids went to bed, determined to do this right, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. One night, David came home to find Isabella sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by rejected proposals. She'd been trying to partner with local hospitals and mental health facilities, but nobody was taking them seriously. They look at us and see a college dropout and a warehouse worker playing nonprofit, Isabella said, frustration clear in her voice. One director actually laughed when I explained our concept. Laughed David? So we prove them wrong, David said simply. We start small. We help one person at a time until they can't ignore us anymore. They decided to begin with something concrete. Isabella used part of her trust fund to install their first crisis intervention station. It was a bench with a weatherproof phone that connected directly to a trained counselor, available 24 hours a day. They put it on the bridge where David had found Isabella. The installation day was emotional. Isabella stood at the railing where she'd once stood ready to jump, but this time she was on the safe side, watching workers bolt the bench into place. This is going to save lives, David said, standing beside her. I hope so, Isabella whispered. I really hope so. 2 weeks later, they got their first call. A 17-year-old boy named Tyler had used the phone at 2 a.m. The counselor talked him down, got him connected with services, potentially saved his life. When David and Isabella heard about it, they both cried. We did that, Isabella said in wonder. We actually helped someone. One down, David smiled. Many more to go. But not everyone was happy about their success. Isabella's family had been quiet for months. But that changed when a local news station did a story about the crisis bench on the bridge. The reporter interviewed both David and Isabella, telling the story of how they met and what inspired the foundation. The segment aired on a Thursday evening. By Friday morning, Isabella's phone was blowing up with calls from numbers she'd blocked months ago. Her mother left a voicemail. David heard it accidentally when Isabella played it on speaker, not realizing what it was. Isabella, this is your mother. I saw you on the news talking about your suicide attempts like it's something to be proud of. Do you have any idea what this does to our family? To our name? Your father has clients asking questions. This needs to stop. Call me immediately. Isabella deleted the voicemail, her hands shaking. Don't let them get to you, David said. What we're doing matters. What they think doesn't. Easy for you to say, Isabella snapped, then immediately looked apologetic. I'm sorry. They still get under my skin. That weekend, things got worse. Isabella's father showed up at the apartment. Not Rafael this time, but Antonio Castellano himself. David had seen him in the news before, a distinguished man with silver hair and expensive suits. In person, he was even more intimidating. I need to speak with my daughter, Antonio said, his accent thick but his English perfect. Alone? Anything you have to say you can say in front of David, Isabella said, appearing in the doorway. Her father's face was hard. You're making a spectacle of yourself, of this family, talking about your problems on television like we're some common family without dignity. Mental illness isn't about dignity, Dad. It's about survival. You had everything, Antonio said, his voice rising. The best schools, the best opportunities. We worked ourselves to the bone to give you those chances. And you threw it away because you were sad? David stepped forward. With all due respect, Mr. Castellano, that's not how depression works. Antonio looked at David like he was noticing an insect. And you think you're helping her? You're enabling this behavior, making her think it's acceptable to be weak, to give up. I didn't give up, Isabella said, her voice stronger now. I survived. Despite you. Despite a family that treated my illness like a character flaw. I'm still here, Dad, and I'm helping other people survive too. By embarrassing us? By telling the truth, Isabella's eyes blazed. You want to know what's embarrassing? Having a daughter who tried to kill herself 3 times. And your first response was to make sure nobody found out. Not to help me. Not to understand. Just to hide me away like I was something shameful. Antonio's face went red. We gave you treatment. The best money could buy. You gave me silence, Isabella shot back. You gave me shame. You made me feel like I was broken. Like I was failing you just by being sick. Do you know what that does to a person? Do you even care? For a moment, Antonio looked like he might actually be listening, but then his expression hardened again. If you continue with this foundation, if you keep using the Castellano name to promote this agenda, I will make sure you regret it. I already dropped the Castellano name, Isabella said quietly. The foundation paperwork lists me as Isabella Martinez, Mom's maiden name. I don't want your name, Dad. I don't want your money or your approval. I just wanted you to love me even when I wasn't perfect. But you can't do that, can you? Antonio stood there silent. Then he turned and walked away without another word. After he left, Isabella collapsed onto the couch, all her strength gone. David sat beside her, not saying anything, just being there. I kept hoping, Isabella finally said. All this time I kept hoping they'd come around. That they'd see what I'm trying to do and be proud. But they never will they? Maybe not, David admitted. But you know who is proud? Tyler. That 17-year-old kid who called our hotline. And his parents who still have their son. And the next person who uses that bench, and the next. They don't care about the Castellano name. They just care that someone answered when they called for help. Isabella wiped her eyes. You always know what to say. Not always. But I try. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in Isabella. The confrontation with her father seemed to free something in her. She stopped checking her phone hopefully every time it rang. She stopped flinching when they drove past her old neighborhood. She started referring to David's apartment as home, without hesitation. The foundation grew too. They installed 5 more crisis benches around the city. They trained 20 volunteers to answer the hotline. They partnered with a local therapist who offered free sessions to people who called their number. And then came the call that changed everything. David was home with the kids when his phone rang. It was a counselor from their hotline, her voice excited. David, you need to come down to the center. Now, we just got a call from a woman who says she wants to donate to the foundation. She's talking about a substantial amount. How substantial? David asked. She says she wants to fully fund 24-hour staffing for all our crisis stations. She wants to add stations in 10 more locations. David, she's talking about $500,000. David's hand shook. Who is she? She says her name is Victoria Chen. Her son used our bridge station last month. We saved his life. She wants to meet you and Isabella in person. After hanging up, David found Isabella in the kitchen teaching Lily how to make empanadas. Izzy, he said, we need to talk. Something incredible just happened. Isabella looked up, flour on her hands and hope in her eyes. Tell me. As David explained about Victoria Chen's call, he watched Isabella's expression change from surprise to disbelief to pure joy. Lily was cheering, not fully understanding, but caught up in the excitement. Ben came running from his room. What's happening? Something good, David said, pulling all of them into a hug. Something really good. That night, lying in bed, David thought about how far they'd come. 6 months ago, he'd been a struggling single dad with nothing to offer but kindness. Now he was co-founder of an organization that was actually saving lives. He thought about Isabella, asleep in the next room. No longer the broken girl from the bridge, but a woman with purpose and passion. Sometimes, David realized, the people we save end up saving us right back. 18 months after that night on the bridge, David stood at a podium on that same bridge, looking out at a crowd of over 200 people. The bridge had been officially renamed Hope Bridge, and today was the ceremony to celebrate the Second Chance Foundation's first anniversary. David wore a suit that Isabella had helped him pick out. It still felt strange, like playing dress-up. But when he looked down at his notes, he remembered why he was here. 47 lives. That's how many people their crisis stations had directly helped in the past year. 47 people who might not be here today without that phone, without those benches, without someone answering when they called. A year and a half ago, David began, his voice shaking slightly. I was driving across this bridge, wondering how I was going to feed my kids. I was barely holding on myself, and then I saw someone who needed help more than I did. He told the story of that night, of stopping his car, of talking to a young woman named Isabella, who was standing on the wrong side of the railing. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I didn't know that night would change my life, David continued. I didn't know that the person I saved would turn around and save me right back. But that's what happened. Isabella stood beside him now, healthy and radiant in a way that seemed impossible compared to that broken girl from the bridge. She was the foundation's executive director. David was the director of community outreach. Together they'd built something real. Their program had expanded beyond what they'd dreamed. 20 crisis stations across the city, a 24-hour hotline staffed by trained counselors, a partnership with local hospitals to provide support for people leaving psychiatric care, over 200 trained volunteers ready to help. After David finished speaking, Isabella took the microphone. She talked about mental health, about the importance of removing stigma, about how asking for help isn't weakness but courage. I stand here today because someone stopped, Isabella said, her voice clear and strong, because someone saw me in my darkest moment and decided I was worth saving. And now, every single day we try to be that person for someone else. In the front row sat Ben and Lily, now 12 and 9. They'd grown up watching David and Isabella build this foundation. Ben had started a mental health awareness club at his school. Lily volunteered to answer phones at the crisis center, talking to kids her own age who were struggling. But the biggest surprise of the day came during the reception afterward. A black Mercedes pulled up and David's heart sank. He recognized that car. Raphael stepped out, followed by 2 other people.
Isabella's parents, Antonio and Maria Castellano. Isabella froze when she saw them.
David moved closer to her, ready to step in if needed, but Raphael didn't look angry. He looked tired. Sad even Isabella, he said quietly.
Can we talk?
Isabella glanced at David. He nodded, staying close but giving them space. We've been following what you've been doing. Raphael continued. The foundation, the lives you've saved. Dad read every article, watched every interview. Antonio stepped forward. He looked older than David remembered, the silver in his hair more pronounced. His eyes were red like he'd been crying. I was wrong, Antonio said, his voice breaking. About everything. About you. About what you needed. Maria, Isabella's mother, put a hand on her daughter's arm. 3 weeks ago, your cousin Miguel tried to take his life. He's only 15. And when we got the call, all I could think was, we failed you, and now we're failing him the same way. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. Is Miguel okay? He's alive, Raphael said. He used one of your crisis stations, the one on 5th Street. The counselor talked to him for an hour, then got him to the hospital. The doctor said if he'd waited any longer. Raphael couldn't finish the sentence. Antonio's hands were shaking. I stood in that hospital room looking at my nephew, and all I could see was you. All those times you needed help, and I was too proud, too worried about what people would think. I almost lost you, Isabella. We almost lost you 3 times, and I was too blind to see what really mattered. We can't undo the past, Maria said softly. We can't take back the things we said, the way we treated your illness like it was something shameful. But we want to try. We want to be your family again, if you'll let us. Isabella was crying now. So was Maria. Even Antonio had tears running down his face. Miguel wants to meet you, Raphael added. He knows you're his cousin. He knows you started this foundation. He says you saved his life. Isabella looked at David. He gave her an encouraging nod. This was her decision to make. I'd like to meet him, Isabella said finally. And I'd like to try. With all of you. But things have to be different. They will be, Antonio promised. I'm funding a mental health program at my company. Counseling for all employees and their families. No questions asked. Raphael suggested it, and he was right. If we can't take care of our own people, we don't deserve to be in business. And we'd like to make a donation to your foundation, Maria added. Not to buy your forgiveness, but because what you're doing matters. Because you're saving people like Miguel, like you. The reunion wasn't perfect. There were still years of hurt to work through, conversations to be had, trust to rebuild. But it was a start. And sometimes, David thought, a start is everything. Later that evening, after the ceremony ended and the crowds dispersed, David and Isabella sat on one of their crisis benches. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Can you believe this is our life now? Isabella asked. David shook his head. Not even a little bit. Some days I wake up and think it's all a dream. Thank you, Isabella said. For everything. For stopping that night. For not giving up on me. For believing we could do this. You don't have to thank me. We're family. And they were. In every way that mattered, they were family. Isabella was Aunt Izzy to Ben and Lily. She spent Christmas mornings opening presents with them, summer evenings teaching them to cook, quiet nights helping with homework. The laundry room had long since been converted into a real bedroom. This was her home now. David's phone buzzed. A text from their crisis center. Another successful intervention. A 23-year-old woman named Sophie had called from one of their stations. She was safe now, getting help. That's 48, David said softly. 48 people who are still here, Isabella added. 48 families who didn't lose someone they love. They sat in comfortable silence watching the city lights come on as darkness fell. David thought about all the nights he'd driven across this bridge, tired and scared and barely holding on. He'd never imagined that stopping his car one night would lead to this. A young man approached the bench hesitantly. He was maybe 25, wearing a backpack, looking lost. "Excuse me," he said. "Is this the crisis helpline bench?" "It is," David said gently, standing up. "Are you okay?" The young man's eyes were red. "Not really. I've been thinking about jumping, but I saw the sign and I thought maybe I should call first. But I'm scared." "What's your name?" Isabella asked, her voice warm. "James. James, I'm Isabella and this is David, and I'm going to tell you something important." Isabella gestured to the bench. 2 years ago, I was standing on this bridge ready to jump. David stopped and talked to me. And I'm so glad he did, because if I'd jumped, I would have missed all of this. The good days. The bad days. The chance to help people like you, everything. James sat down slowly. "You were really going to jump?" "I was. And I'm not going to lie and say everything's been perfect since. It hasn't. But I'm alive, James, and that means I get to keep trying. Keep fighting. Keep hoping." David sat on the other side of James. "We have counselors you can talk to right now. No judgment, no pressure, just someone who wants to listen." For the next hour, they sat with James. They listened to his story. They connected him with their crisis team. They watched as he slowly relaxed, as hope crept back into his eyes. By the time James left, he had a counselor's number, an appointment scheduled, and the knowledge that he wasn't alone. 49. Isabella whispered as they watched him walk away. David put his arm around her shoulders. 49 people who chose to stay. As they walked back to their car, David thought about that first night, about how close he'd come to driving past, about how one choice, one moment of deciding to stop and help, had rippled out in ways he never could have imagined. He'd saved Isabella that night. But the truth was they'd saved each other, and now together, they were saving others. Because that's what happens when you choose kindness over indifference, when you choose to stop instead of driving past, when you choose to see someone's pain and say, "You matter. Your life matters. Please don't give up." Sometimes the people we save become our family. Sometimes saving someone else is how we learn to save ourselves. And sometimes the worst night of your life is actually the beginning of something beautiful. David looked at Isabella, walking beside him in the fading light, and smiled. She smiled back, and in that moment everything felt exactly right. They'd both been broken once, but together they'd learned something important. Broken things can be mended, and sometimes they come back stronger than before. And that was worth everything.